All right, I'm out on Rialto Beach for my first sunset up here in Olympic National Park, and I love shooting the coastline. I love shooting the beaches, and this beach in particular is extremely exciting because it's got a pretty steep slope and it makes for some very aggressive waves. And tonight I've got some great sea foam developing out there. The clouds are looking okay, and I think this might turn out to be a decent sunset. So before I even got my camera out of the bag, one of the first things that I do when I come to the coastline to photograph is I'll spend time and I'll just watch the waves. I will sit down on a log and I'll watch the waves, I'll watch the beach, I'll see different patterns start to develop. The way the waves break on the shore in different parts of the beach may create some unique shapes that I could use when I drag out my shutter, when I get longer shutter speed. And so I'll sit and I will study the ocean and the beach topography and find places that I think might produce really interesting photographs. And of course, anytime you come to the beach, you need to look at your tide tables to know whether the tide's coming in, coming out, and how high it's going to be. And never, ever, ever turn your back on the ocean, which is what my grandfather taught me, and it's stuck true today. Because of sneaker waves and logs, driftwood that may be in the water, being around the ocean can be dangerous. So you really need to take care when you're out here on the beach photographing. And how much money do you want to bet that I'm going to end up with flooded boots? Every time I come to the ocean, I end up flooding my footwear. I've even got a photograph titled Wet Boots because I flooded my boots. It's something about me in the ocean that I play with the waves, I get close, I retreat, but sometimes I misjudge it and I flood my footwear. That's not such a bad thing. All right, I've brought the conversation back indoors so you can hear me a little bit better. And what I'd like to do is over the next couple of minutes talk to you about what it is like shooting the ocean and give you some tips that you might be able to use in your next trip to the beach. You know, I've grown up a good portion of my life next to the Pacific Ocean, and I've seen its many moods, its hissy fits, its tantrums, its beautiful calm days. I've looked at the waves, I've studied them, I've photographed them, and so I've got a very intimate knowledge and a love affair with the ocean. I'm very much a water person and love water, and in particular the ocean. And when I photograph the ocean, I look at it as a very unique opportunity because each and every wave that comes ashore is different. And that different wave allows me a new opportunity to create a very unique piece of art that I might not see again. But let's go ahead and jump into a few of the most common topics and a few tips that I want to give you for photographing the ocean. One of the first most obvious topics I want to talk about is when is the best time to photograph the ocean. There is no best time. There are different times for different results and different types of photographs. You can shoot in the morning, you can shoot in the middle of the day, you can shoot in the evening, you can even shoot at night at the ocean. It doesn't matter. It really matters when you shoot as to what types of photographs you want to come away with. There's never any bad light. There's just different light for different subjects and different types of photographs. You know, obviously sunrise, sunset is the most obvious time to photograph along the shoreline. These are the most, of course, the most popular times. It's the most colorful, the most dramatic. And I do a fair amount of shooting during sunrise and sunset. You know, sunrise is characterized by soft colors, pastels, easy light, soft light, where sunset is typically a bit more energetic, a little bit brighter, bolder, dynamic colors, a little bit higher contrast. And so each of these, sunrise and sunset, kind of produces a slightly different type of photograph, even at the same location, just because of the quality of the light and the colors that you may generate. But I tell you, the most creatively satisfying for me times are not sunrise and sunset. Those are very obvious. Your subject is obvious. It's the sun. It's the dramatic color in the sky. But for me, I find more creative satisfaction at the beach at different times. And let me go ahead and talk about that real quick to you. So these other times that I'm talking about that I find really creatively satisfying, I call them shoulder times. So it's those times around sunrise and sunset that aren't those actual time periods. You get very different results and have very different creative possibilities. Now, in the morning, kind of the shoulder time is the blue hour or twilight before sunrise happens. You know, the world is still, the light is just starting to come up. You can get some really long shutter speeds. Everything is soft and muted, tranquil, serene. Those are all words that kind of describe that time period for me. And so I can create some really gentle artistic images with very long exposure water motion happening to give a certain feel to the photographs. In the evening, you know, sunrise or sunset is at a particular time. The hour before sunset is called the golden hour. And that to me is one of the most rewarding times to be on the beach. The light gets to be, the sun is starting to dip to the horizon, and we get this low angle light that is oftentimes very warm. This low angle light produces some great shadows along the beach, and so you can start to really identify and bring out different patterns in the sand or the shadows from the small rocks and pebbles on the beach. This low angle light provides you a whole different world of compositional elements as it casts shadows and details across the landscape. You know, it also provides some great backlighting for subjects, which I love to do when I'm at the beach. And it's just that warmth that we get during that golden hour, to me, is one of the most creatively compelling reasons to show up to the beach early. You know, then you shoot sunset and life is great. You're focused on the sun and what it does, and that's beautiful. And then about 15 to 20 minutes after sunset, official sunset, we start entering in this twilight period. And that's another time, like sunrise, where the shadows get really long, the light gets really low. We again enter into soft pastel colors, really long shutter speeds. And it's this twilight period that's post-sunset that I really enjoy for looking at water motion, the way the water interacts with the wet sand. There's all sorts of abstract types of images that I typically shoot on my way back to the car. So once sunset happens, don't pack up your stuff. Wait around for a good 20 minutes to a half an hour. Pay attention to the light during twilight and see kind of what happens. You might find this to be a really creatively wonderful time for you, depending on the kinds of images you like to shoot. There are several factors that go into choosing the appropriate shutter speed for every particular beach location that you visit. First one is the size and the speed of the waves. If they're bigger waves, there's more water, you might not need as fast a shutter speed. If the water's moving fast, again, you might be able to have a faster shutter speed to get a certain amount of water motion. So the volume and speed of water is a direct impact on what is the quote-unquote right shutter speed for you. The slope of the beach can also affect the water motion effect that you get in your photograph. If it's a really flat beach, the water can come in, it lingers on the beach, and then it gently goes out, versus a very steep beach where the water is going to recede off the beach extremely fast. So reading the beach and the slope of the beach can affect what shutter speed you choose for your particular photographs. Also just wherever you are on the beach with your composition, just the amount of water that appears in that composition will have a dramatic impact on the perceived water motion in your photograph. So if you just have a little bit of water in your photograph, you're going to really need to be cognizant of that and be articulate if water motion is an important part of the composition, versus kind of having the whole frame or a large majority of the frame taken up by water. The viewer is going to be sort of overwhelmed with the amount of water motion that's going on. So really paying attention to how much water there is, and that might dictate your shutter speed. So if I had a lot of water in my frame, I might want to soften the water a little bit more than normal so it's not as visually overpowering. Versus just a little bit of water, I might have a slightly faster shutter speed, so that water is a little bit more defined, more articulate, more of a recognizable element in the frame. I think one of the biggest determinations of shutter speed is, what do you like? How do you like your water? Do you like definition? Do you like the soft cotton candy, dreamy-like effect that can happen with really long shutter speeds? A lot of it is up to you. I typically prefer a little bit of definition in my water, and so I will pick a shutter speed that gives me that water motion but doesn't blur and mush out everything else. So I like some definition. In the Pacific Northwest, I run shutter speeds from, a third of a second to 2 seconds to kind of get that definition. But there's times where I'll run 5 second, 10 second, 25 second exposures to kind of flatten out the water and really give me that dreamy effect. But so much depends on how much water there is, how fast it is, and what you want to do in your photograph. Now we get to the creative part of ocean photography. You've picked a location, you've studied the surf, you've chosen the right shutter speed. When do you take the photograph? That is the creative part of photographing the ocean. This is what I want to dive into a little bit deeper with you. Now, I'd like to list out maybe 4 cycles of a wave when it comes on shore. There's the incoming wave as it crashes on the beach, there's a pause on top, there's the receding part of it, and then there's this moment between waves. Each one of these different cycles can produce dramatically different results. And so I want to show you some examples and dive into why you might choose to shoot at either one of these different cycles. And if nothing else, when next time you go to the beach, take a moment and observe these kind of 4 stages of waves when they crash on the beach. So the first cycle in the life of a wave is an incoming wave. So it crests as it reaches the shoreline, and the wave crashes on the beach and it starts rushing up the beach towards you. This is sort of the incoming cycle. And if you really stop and think and look at these incoming waves and images of waves when they're shot coming toward the camera, there is a lot of pent-up energy. You can sense the energy in the wave. There's a little bit of tension because you don't know how fast or how far up the beach the wave is going to go. So that energy and that tension are things that I can use in my photographs as sort of a mood setting thing to create a little bit more of a dynamic photograph. Maybe put the viewer on edge just a little bit, but the energy that I see for incoming waves can be used in photographs. Now, the thing that I will caution you on is oftentimes when the wave is coming in, you don't get this really well-defined streaks of foam, which is what a lot of people like to do at the beach. You'll get a wall of foam, a wall of white. You might get a few streaks depending on what's going around at the beach. But in general, you don't get the really, really crisp, clean foam streaks on the incoming cycle of a wave. You know, I think that, these incoming waves, they're very dynamic, they're very action-oriented, but it really just depends on what you want to do in a photograph. So if you want to create a little bit of tension, a little bit of, ooh, should I stay, should I run up the beach? What should I do as the viewer? There's some wonderful things that you can do mood-setting-wise with incoming waves. The other thing I love to do with incoming waves is oftentimes, especially up here in the Northwest, there's a lot of rocks on the beach, small rocks to big rocks. And I love to catch a wave just as it's reaching a rock. And it's this interplay of this dynamic motion of the wave and the solidity and stability of the rock. The contrast of those opposing forces is sometimes a really cool dynamic to have in your photograph. So incoming waves can be great just for certain types of photographs. So the waves crashed onto the beach, it's pushing its way up the beach, and then at some point, all of the wave's energy will be dissipated. And when that happens, the wave and the water pause before it starts to recede. So this next cycle I call the pause on top. Waves come in, they pause for a moment, and then they start to recede. And this moment of pause, sometimes it's just a fraction of a second if the beach is really steep, or it's a second or more on flatter beaches. This pause is when everything is sort of suspended, very little movement, and you can use that moment in time to capture photographs that are really engaging, in my opinion. Oftentimes there's sea foam at the leading edge of this wave, and that little line of foam pauses right at the top. It's not moving, and that can be a wonderful compositional element for you leading off into the frame. So I'll set my camera up kind of perpendicular to the ocean, looking down the beach, and I'll shoot this foam line as it goes down the beach, leading the viewer back into the photograph. So this pause on top is absolutely fantastic for me because it freezes the motion, but it doesn't freeze the ocean and the waves. It doesn't look unnatural. I don't like to see waves that are just frozen at really fast shutter speeds, but this is a way to not really have any water motion. You freeze it, you pause nature in its cycle, and you have this great compositional element that you can use in your photograph. All right, moving along to the next cycle. So the wave has come in, it's paused on top. What's it going to do? It's going to recede back to the ocean. This receding phase, or this part of the cycle, to me is the best time to capture foam streaks, water motion and foam streaks. Because oftentimes, as I said, the wave comes in, there's foam pushed at the leading edge of this wave. Because that foam is all bunched up, when the wave starts to recede, we have a good amount of subject matter that we can blur as it travels back to the ocean. So I'll be standing in the waves or standing on the beach with my feet in the water with the foam underneath me as it streaks away out back into the ocean. This is, to me, just a wonderful time for capturing water motion. And especially if you're like in the Pacific Northwest, we have rocky shorelines that have all sorts of different shapes. And to catch the water bending around rocks or going through rock channels, those types of things, the best time to capture that type of effect is when the wave is receding. Okay, so intake, pause, receding for great foam streaks and great water motion. So the last cycle I wanted to talk about is this phase between waves. And this is extremely important when you're on a sandy beach. As the wave recedes, of course, it leaves a very wet patch of sand. And that wet, sandy beach can be a great tool for you in your photography. It can be a reflective surface, so you can reflect the color of the sky. You can reflect subjects that are above ground. You can reflect the sun. I also, besides the reflective properties, I also use the dividing line between the wet sand and the drier sand. Like I did the foam lines, this can be a sort of a dividing line in your composition. So don't overlook this moment between waves or between even sets of waves. And so what you'll find me doing at the beach is I will be, I'll have to retreat a little bit from the wave. And then once the wave really recedes and before the next one comes in, I'll walk out into this reflective portion of the sand and I will quickly compose and shoot 1 or 2 frames before having to retreat before I get wet boots. So this period between waves is oftentimes an extremely important and creatively satisfying period in the wave cycle. So there you go with wave cycles, the 4 kind of stages of waves coming in. There's so much more to do at the beach. There's driftwood, there's beach foliage, just on shore. But what I really like to do is look at foam patterns, look at reflections, and create abstract images. There's a lot of things that you can do by just sort of paying attention to shapes, textures, and colors around the beach. Lots of abstract, subtle, nuanced types of images you can do. Beautiful stuff and really creatively satisfying for me. The other tip I'll give you, and I do this a lot, I see different patterns in the sand and I try to capture them in my frame. If you're going to do that, get really low and really close, because these patterns that we see with our eyes can sometimes be not too big in a normal height composition. So lower your tripod, get low and get close, and really make these patterns and shapes in the sand a fantastic compositional element that occupies a good amount of the foreground of the image, with the ocean and the sky in the background if you have that. So there you have it. There's some tips and some images for shooting the ocean. Any trip to the beach, in my opinion, is a fantastic time, no matter what the weather. I've been out there in stormy conditions, sunny conditions, everything in between. There's always something to photograph at the beach. So hopefully you'll use maybe 1 or 2 of these tips, or at least think about them during your next trip to the beach. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Stay tuned for more videos and keep shooting.